Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Diane Allen, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action. Welcome, everybody, to Someone Gets Me. Today, we're going to talk about dealing with change using art and creativity. I have a Dutch artist and author with us, Renate, and she's coming to us from Spain, though. So we are going to talk about how to deal with change using art and creativity from a very successful artist and a very successful author, all in the same person. So welcome to the show, Renate.
Thank you. Very glad that I'm here.
Thank you for taking the time to come and share with us about dealing with change. Because, with coronavirus happening and all of the things in the world, and then the changes underneath it all, it's so important to find a way to deal with it in a healthy way so we don't get trapped in unhealthy behaviors or even addiction, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to start out a little bit with some of your story because it's very interesting. And I would like to know, when did you start to become an artist? Have you always been creative since you were a little girl? Or how did all this evolve into your artistic creativity?
Yes, well, my mother told me that when I was a little baby or 1.5 year old, if I was crying or something, she would give me a pen or something and a piece of paper, and that would make me quiet and calm. So I guess at a very young age that was in me. So I can remember always having been drawing and doodling and doing things. However, when I was a teenager, my father, as a lot of fathers, maybe more than mothers, I don't know, he told me, well, if you want to be an artist, they don't make money, so you can't do that. You really must go to a secretary school. Now, I must admit that does come in helpful right now because I can type really fast, and that's handy if you're an author. So in that sense, it was okay. But I was a hobbyist for a big part of my artistic career, really. And then in my 20s, I started traveling. I went all over the world. I lived in various countries, in Israel, in New Zealand, and then I went to Italy. And the idea was, I thought, well, I'll just go to Italy because I wasn't happy I was a secretary for some years, and I didn't like it. It was literally depressed. It wasn't me. And so I thought maybe I like languages, so maybe I can learn more languages. I'll learn Italian, I'll learn French, and then I can get a more interesting job, go away and travel and things like that in my job. But then I came to Italy, but I was always painting, and I did some murals, and then there was an art teacher actually, and he saw my work and he said, "But sei un artista," and he invited me, which means you are an artist. Right. And he invited me to come the next year to this small little village at a cultural festival, and they were giving me an exhibition space, a beautiful medieval building. And I could exhibit there for a month, and everything was kind of paid for, and I could just sell. And I had to sort of cross over a year. So I went back to the Netherlands, and I was fortunate enough to work in the studio of a Dutch artist who was very successful as an abstract artist. And in that time, I was painting rather Dali-like. That was kind of my style. And she advised me to loosen up, which I did. And I had my first exhibition, and I sold not all, but almost all my paintings and that first exhibition. And that was for me the moment that I thought, yes, soy un artista. I am an artist. Anyway, I went to Italy, lived there for 4 years, then my relationship broke up. I came back to the Netherlands, but then I had to go through this process of being accepted for art galleries to be a a serious professional artist. So I was checked out by this serious committee, and then I was accepted. And then I was officially sort of okay to go into the gallery scene. That's kind of the story. So, and this is now over 35 years ago. And I moved to Spain in 2003.
Oh, that's amazing. And I want to go back to when your dad said go to secretarial school because artists don't make money, and how now the typing skills and some of those skills pay off because you're writing and you're an author. And I think so many times we think that if we learn something outside of the thing we want to do all the time, that it's never going to work or it doesn't pan out. But I always say everything works together for the good. And everything comes together in the end. Even if you're learning a skill today that you think has no relevance, it will have a relevance at some time. And so you're like a living example of that. Like, hey, I didn't want to be a secretarian. It was actually kind of boring and I didn't even like it. And I was depressed even. And you stuck with it while you kept your creativity going on the side. You didn't shut it down. You just found other avenues. And that natural coping skill, I mean, obviously paid off. And then the right people at the right time saw you. And the other thing that gets me is you said yes to the offer, because some people would have said no. They would have like Howard, or I'm not an artist, or thought about it, or declined that invitation. And so I always say, just say yes. Always say yes.
Thank you actually for pointing that out. And it gives me goosebumps because I never thought about it that way, because I am very often certainly in the past doubting myself, but I had no doubts. That was very strong in me. Yes, that is me. I'm going to do that. Right. So interesting. Yeah.
Right. You said yes when maybe at another time or in another way you would have said no. And certainly the lesson for all of us is when something presents itself to us, then we want to say yes to the opportunity, because we never know where it's going to take us. We never know its opportunity. Even though you didn't want to go to secretarial school, you said yes. And now as an author, you can type really fast. And as a business owner, you have skill sets that some people had to learn from scratch if they're going to own a business, because nobody ever taught them yet. So
also true.
So when you say yes, great things happen. So I just want to point that out to all the listeners and to myself and remind us that I always say, just say yes, keep saying yes, because the right thing will happen at the right time. And as I'm listening to your story, I'm like, yes.
Yeah, true.
Oh, it's interesting. Wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. So let's talk about change for a minute. How do you use creativity and art to help somebody through change, yourself or somebody else? What do you do? How do you use it?
Well, I have myself. It's been a coping mechanism, I think, throughout my life, because painting keeps me sane. That's the simplest way of saying it. If I do it anyway. So, but also writing, by the way, they're both kind of equally important. I published my first book in 2010 and have since written 8. But that was the moment that I kind of felt I'm also a writer, and as I like to say, I tell stories with my painting, and I paint a picture with my stories. That's kind of a nice way of saying it, I feel, but it's also kind of true, because I like writing in a sort of way, the way that I speak, and I like writing stories, real stories, actually. But helping it, for me, it's a coping mechanism. But I became also an art teacher in 2006. And I never thought I would be, but I was living in this was already in Spain, and I was living in this little village, one of those typical whitewashed villages. And there was a woman, and she said, "Oh, I really want to learn how to paint with acrylics." And she said, "Do you do that?" I said, "Well, yeah, I do both. I do oils and acrylics." And she says, "I really want to learn that." And I said, "Oh, there's already 2 teachers in the village. It's a small village." She said, "Yeah, but one's just doing live drawing and the other one is doing watercolors. And I'm not interested. I've been to them and I didn't like it. I want to do acrylics." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll give it a try." And so it was through somebody else that I started doing that. And I've been an art teacher since then. And what I've found is that I'm actually, that sounds maybe a bit weird, but I'm pretty good at it for the right people. Because what I really like to do is let people discover their own artist, because I believe we all have creativity within, and you can express yourself with art, and it is really healing. And everybody can find their own style with a bit of guidance, with a few tools. So in my classes, I don't tell them we're all going to work from this still life, which can be very useful and it can be very helpful. I personally don't work from examples. Even though I paint a lot of women, I don't use models. But for people in my class, I do give them some examples, but I encourage them to work from something they like and try a style of painting that they like, so that they have fun in the creative process. So some of them go on to actually become selling artists, which makes me kind of proud. Two of them so far, but most of them are just painting for pleasure and because it makes them calm. One lady actually made a testimonial, and she says, when I paint, and she says, I'm not good, but those are her words. And she says, I just get peace of mind. I just feel so at peace when I do that. And I think that's the power of creativity, and maybe more so in these days and of coronavirus. And of course, through COVID, that became again a big change. And my art classes just disappeared, because I was also teaching teenagers, but quite specific teenagers from world schooling families. And but those classes disappeared. And then I had to take my first steps in teaching online, which I know a lot of artists are now doing. And I do have an art class on a Saturday morning for women. And that's the only one so far that I've set up and is going well. It's been going well for a year. And I myself was maybe the most surprised that it actually works, and that it's really nice that people are still in the class. They can still interact. It's still like a nice, welcoming little group. So, yeah. So it's healing for people. And that's actually maybe the best answer to what you just asked me. Bit of a long answer, but.
Oh, it's a great answer. So
okay.
I work with visionary leaders, and all my clients are creatives, are musicians, artists, athletes, creatives.
Yes.
And every once in a while, some of the most gifted, talented, creative people will look right at me and say, I don't have any creativity left, or I can't get to my creativity, or it's all blocked up, something like that.
Yeah.
So if somebody said that to you, what would you do to help them? Or what would you say to them? How would you help that person access their own inner creativity, which we know is in there, even though they can't feel it?
I would encourage them to try, just break through that strong feeling of I don't have it. Maybe work from an example. Maybe from there's different ways of doing it. You could make these days with, and maybe some people say, oh, you shouldn't really do that, but I disagree. Just a picture of an artist that you like, maybe an old art, maybe let's take Van Gogh. And find a picture, maybe turn it into like a cartoon, or not so much a cartoon, but into a drawing with the telephone app, and then work from that and do your own thing with it. I always encourage people to do their own thing. When they work from an example, I let them work from my examples if they like to, because a lot of people need that sort of structure. They need to look at something they can copy. And I do feel that if they work from and go outside and work on an easel, that's not the easiest thing. You need to have some experience, I think, it's just nice to have something there that you can look at and that already has colors and techniques. I do tell everybody, of course, to refer to the artist if they show their work to people and on Facebook, and I do recommend to not sell that. Right. But that's my way of teaching. Yeah.
So the way that somebody, let me see if I get this right. So if somebody feels all blocked up and they are not connected to their creativity, what you're saying is just start somewhere.
Yes, give tips, of course. I would give them tips where they could start. And for me, that would be find something you really like. It can be just an image of a heart. and copy that hard and just start and maybe focus on the mixing, and then see what comes. So get in touch with your intuition.
And so once you get the flow going, when you first connect with something that you really love and like, and then you start kind of like put the brush to the canvas, then it starts coming through, and let it come through instead of trying to overthink it.
Yes, let it come through. And I've got a lady in my art class now. She says she was there before, and then she stopped because she felt awkward, because there were some ladies who've really developed and they are now making really nice paintings. And she feels a little bit awkward about that. She told me, but she came back because she says, I need to pay. I need it. And I want to come back. And she finally said, I was able to let go of my perfectionism. I was able to let go of looking at others and just get in touch with who I am and what do I like. And then with your tips, your help, how to do, she found that she was a smooth, I don't know, artists will probably understand what I mean, quite a smooth artist, that everything, because I personally like to work with a palette knife, so it's splashing things on. And she wanted to be smooth, so I gave her some techniques so you can do that. And so she's now really helpful, and she's now happy with what she does. That's actually what I'm trying to say, I think.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
That's perfect. And I think that what you're saying is so valuable, because so many people overthink things, and then they're perfectionistic, and they let the fear and the perfectionism stop them from having joy.
Yes.
Of the creativity. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that perfectionism is a big block for a lot of people.
I think so too. Yes. I see it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet you do. And so what happens when you have somebody who's overthinking? Like they're so in their head, they don't let the flow come and don't let the intuition come. Is there a tip you would give somebody who's like, always in their head, and we need to get it more into their heart and more into their flow?
Well, I would say that when you are painting, you're not really in your head anymore. Well, that's my experience.
So once that brush hits the canvas and you start,
yeah, because
it brings you down.
Yes, because I don't think, most of the people I have been teaching and who came to me, the moment you are either, if you work from an example or from whatever you do, if it just comes from you, or if it's an example, or you try to copy some flowers or whatever it is, it looks like you're in your head, because you have to copy and you have to look and you have to observe. And that's part of the whole thing. Observe, learning how to observe. If you can observe, and then you can paint, I think, or at least you can draw, because everybody can put a straight line or a little circle on a piece of paper. So in theory, everybody can do that. So I don't think that happens. I don't think there are perfectionists like this lady who was in my class. And I did encourage her all the time, try and let it go. And my personal way of helping people is, I like to point out the good, and I've had so many people in my classes, because I do like 4-week classes and I do workshops, and so I just like to point out what they are good at. Start with that, and that really lifts them up, and then they become happy. And this can be a tiny little thing. It can be just a little corner on their painting that has really beautiful, accidental, just not intentional mixture of colors, and it's really beautiful. And then I point that out, and I said, if you could do this, then you can do more, and try and focus on that. Focus on what you can, and that usually gets them out of that perfectionism. Mm-hmm. For some, it's more difficult than for others, but
sure. I deal with overthinkers all the time. All my clients are gifted and they love to overthink, and perfectionism is probably our number one barrier we're always dealing with. So that's why I asked you that question, because they're listening to the show. Okay. And so you also are an author, and you paint pictures with your words. And so tell us a little bit about what started the writing. How did that all get started? And, about that transition. I'm interested in how that happened.
Yeah, well, I always liked writing. This was way before the internet and emails. And when I was in New Zealand, I was there for a year. I was 21 when I went there. I wasn't too happy there. So I wrote really long letters to people. And then when I got back to the Netherlands a year later, some people saved my letters, and they said, I love the way you write. I really like the way you write. And I thought, maybe I should do something with this. And then I did try, and I tried to to write down my experience of living in New Zealand. And it was really boring. It didn't work at all. And then actually years later, so I kind of gave up and I continued writing long letters because I always still do long emails, long letters, people who know me. But it's long emails now, letters not so much. But then I came back from Italy and I worked in a small coffee bar for a while. And I became friends with a journalist and I told him this story. I said, I really like to write, but I don't know how to shape it. And then he says, well, may I challenge you? And I said, well, yeah, please do. And he says, well, and he was a literature lover and a book lover. And he said, why don't you write 5 short stories in 3 weeks' time? And what sells really well is eroticism. Is that a good word? Yeah, erotic stories. And so I said, okay, well, I'll try. And I went home and I still remember to this day, I was sitting down on my balcony and the story just came. And I never felt happier. I felt so happy when I wrote. Right. And for me, it works kind of best to start with the ends. And I just wrote 5 stories and he read them and he says, oh, you're very talented. You really should do more with this. And then I actually went to the UK for a week, which was in a bit of a weird, I'm just throwing this in now, but it is a big subject. My mother had euthanasia in the Netherlands and I wanted to get away from it because it was a few weeks before actually this happening. And it's, by the way, a very positive experience and it's fine. And I'm total peace with it because she was really suffering. But I wanted to get away and I went to a little seaside town in the UK and to write. And I met a man. And long story short, he became my partner, came to the Netherlands, and then we actually moved together to Spain 3 years later. However, I kind of stopped the writing and I picked it up when my ex and I we stopped living together. We were still friends, but we weren't partners anymore. I picked it up again. I joined in an English writing club. So I also started translating my stories because I'd written them in Dutch. And I translated them to English, wrote a few more, and that was it. My first book was birthed. Is that how you say it? And it's called Secret Thoughts. So it's just a quirky short stories. And the guy, which was actually really good, he when he suggested for me to write short stories, he said, try and write from a male, as if you are a man, as if you're a woman, as if you are, an object. So I did. And for example, I have a story about a lamppost in the book who is jealous of the street tile, who can look up under the skirts. It's just a funny story, I think. Anyway, but they're very quirky stories. So that was my first book and the start of my writing career. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I love how the creativity is there. And like you say, you paint the pictures with your words.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And I love how it goes with your art. Now, I know one of your stories has to do with addiction and recovery. And a lot of my clients are in recovery as well. And I've been a champion for at least the last 30 years on changing the conversation about addiction to the fact that people are really suffering from pain and trauma, and the judgment and the abuse of people who are suffering has really, really hurt me over many years, because I've been in this space way before people were talking about the fact that we need to see it differently. We need to understand that people who are suffering with different kinds of addictions are just that, suffering, and yes, changing the story and offering real help instead of the superficial things that just don't work, that just placate it, harm reduction. So tell us a little bit about your book that relates to this.
Yes, well, this is the man I met in the UK. He was an alcoholic. He was a so-called functioning binge drinking alcoholic. And I knew from the start, and I decided I was for Florence Nightingale. And that was an interesting ride that follows, I would say, because journey, I'd like to call it a journey, because he was an amazing guy. He was very, very funny, laughed so much with him. And he was very extremely intelligent, but he had a drinking problem, which wasn't always there. He had long periods that he didn't drink. And I totally fell in love with him, and he came to the Netherlands with me, and then we moved to Spain, and he was a very good teacher, an extremely good teacher, and had an excellent CV. So he found a job first in northern Spain, and then we came to the south. And I also became, a teacher for a little while in the north, and then I became a translator from Dutch to English, and he became my proofreader. So we also worked together. And it was a very, wobbly ride is probably an understatement. It wasn't easy, but what irritated me possibly even most was the reaction of a lot of the people I know, of friends, and quite a few of my family members. And they would just say, oh, why don't you leave that jerk? He's a loser and you're too good for that. And how's it possible? You were such an independent woman. And I just felt it's not fair. You don't really understand. And although it wasn't easy, and I did struggle big time, but I'm someone who talks about my problems. But I did find out that a lot of people don't. They like to keep it quiet. They live in isolation, and they think they're alone. And it's a difficult subject. And even my ex, he told me what it's meant for him to be there. And he said, I'm an intelligent guy. Why am I doing this to myself? And the whole subject fascinated me also, in a sense. So when we kind of, at the end of our 12 years together working, and so the last year I started, I don't know how it came that it became a book, but I talked to people and I said, maybe I should write a book about it. And I interviewed other people, and I wrote the book in 3 months, and it just came to me. People just came to me. They said, oh, you can interview me and you can interview me. And I was invited to sit in at an AA meeting in a village nearby. And I'm really grateful to also interview some recovering alcoholics. I interviewed people from throughout Europe, like Belgium not, but Germany, Norway, Denmark, Ireland, England, a lot of countries, Spain, of course. And they all told their stories. And these are like children, partners, parents of alcoholics, but also healthcare workers and alcoholics. And so the book actually tells their stories, but in my style. It's a storytelling book. So there are like, But I was fascinated by it. And my fascination most of all was the fact that people felt so isolated and they felt alone. They felt, oh, gosh, this is happening to me. And that made me almost, and still, I mean, this is behind me now. I've been married to a Spanish avocado farmer, and we're happy. It's a very different life. So it's not a subject in my life anymore, but I'm still very passionate about the subject. So I actually revised and re-edited the book during lockdown, and it's called now Cheers, Breaking the Silence, One Voice at a Time. And I feel it's important. I still feel it's important that people know about this. And as you say, it should be out in the open, and this whole stigma should go. I don't know. I find it still a fascinating subject, and I'm still passionate about it. So, yeah.
Right. Well, as a professional in the substance abuse and mental health world for 40 years, I've been intimately involved with it. And when you're talking about the silence and people being isolated, that's the first thing the disease does, is it isolates the victim, if you will, from its support system, which is the exact same process of domestic violence. So it is traumatizing. And actually, for an alcoholic, when they go out and drink and use, they experience the ultimate betrayal toward themselves. And so the wounds are deep. The process is clear to those of us who understand it, but makes no sense often to somebody who doesn't understand it, because that form of betrayal, self-betrayal, comes in many areas, and other people do it, just not using addiction, right? And the first step of any disease is isolate the person from their support, whatever that is. And so then people think they're all alone. And
Yeah.
once we think we're all alone and we're the only one going through whatever we're going through, whether it's addiction or depression or anything, the moment we start believing we're all alone and it's only happening to us, that is a problem. Like, that's where we need to get help and reach out, even when we
Yes.
don't want to, and even when we don't think we need to, because we're not alone. That is a lie that our brain tells us that's not true.
Yeah.
And so
I
I'm glad
agree.
you wrote the book, and I'm glad you revised the book and are helping give the voice for people. And more people are talking about it, but it's still has a very long way to go.
Yes, and I, because you said isolation also, I think it's both the addict and I think in one of my stories, I call myself addicted to the addict.
Yes.
Because you become, well, they call it codependency. And that was, of course, my story, but I was just as addicted to him as he was to his substance.
Totally great awareness on your part. And I teach that to people and they look at me like I'm goofy, but that's true. So the codependent person is addicted to the addict. So then what happens is, if the addict gets sober and they change, and the codependent person does not change, they're not going to get along. In fact, I've even had husbands and wives, after I've helped somebody get sober and stay sober for quite some time, doing really well, I've had the husband or wife in different situations say to the person who's in recovery, I liked you better when you were high or drunk because I knew what to expect. And so it's a family challenge. It's a family dis-ease, D-I-S-E-A-S-E. It's a dis-ease.
Yes.
The whole family has to be engaged in rectifying what went wrong. And otherwise, we're just spinning circles.
Yes, I totally can see that. Yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So what are you working on today in this time frame? You've got all these books out, you're doing all these painting classes. Are you working on some future project you want to share?
Well, yeah, I have two things that are major. I must admit, and maybe this happens also to a lot of people in lockdown. You're trying to, oh God, where am I going? What can I do? So I want to do this, and I want to get this book more known, and I want to get my Cheers book, which is important to me, seen by more people. And so how do I do that? Do I do this and networking? And I was just driving myself crazy, to be honest. And I thought I need to take a few steps back. So at the moment, I'm trying to take it slowly and focus on my Cheers book and focus on my art. Both. I need them both. They're both important to me. So I'm painting at the moment. I'm painting some bulls, toros, so Spanish bulls, but in my style, very colorful, and I want to give them secret messages because I'm not pro bullfighting. I mean, I'm quite against it, and I don't even eat meat. So, but I kind of like painting animals now. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And the Cheers book, I'm trying to do more with that, and I'm still working on something I would love to do is create a safe space. I haven't done the framework yet, but what I really would love to do is create a group in Facebook where I will give, so it's a safe space where people, and I want to do women because I do think the dynamic change if you put men and women together, and that's not good or bad, but it's just different. But women in a group, and then do art and writing, and I would give suggestions. And I'm not a therapist. I don't pretend to be one, but I do think it could be a nice space to work on yourself. And I would then give art classes and things to do to maybe find some peace of mind or cope with your situation. That's a dream of me. That's something I'm working on developing, and I want to get that out there and do that.
That's wonderful. So for everybody, if you're curious about the book or Renate's art or whatever, in the show notes, you will find all of the links to everything, all of her social media, how to find her website, the book, everything. So go into the show notes and follow her. Tell her you heard her here on Someone Gets Me, and grab the book and join some of the things that she's giving to the world, because as you can hear, she's authentically a really powerful, beneficial presence.
Thank you for saying that.
And so I have a couple questions that are kind of more personal and quirky, if you will. And one is, what is the most memorable food you've ever eaten? You've traveled all over the world, and I'm sure you've had some memorable food in your day. What's the thing that sticks out as the most memorable?
Oof. Oof. Well, I'd probably have to, that sounds maybe a bit weird, but it probably has to be the avocado, because in the Netherlands, I did eat avocados, but I bought them and then they were brown and didn't know so much what to do with it. And since I live in Spain, of course, and then married an avocado farmer, I know about avocados, and the whole, the nicest memories maybe when I just met my husband, and I went with him to the avocado farm. And I think the moment I totally fell in love with him is when I saw that he was in love with his trees. And he showed me his trees, and he, without even showing me, he was sort of doing that to the tree, like blowing it a kiss. And I thought, oh, so I guess that's the most memorable food. But I love food. I love to cook. And I in Italy, I actually interviewed mothers of my friends to write down recipes. And I still have them, and I should create a book of it, but I haven't done that yet. But so I couldn't just pick something else. It's the avocado, I suppose, because there's a quirky story around it.
Sure, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything that you wanted to share today that I have not asked you about? I have one last question, but I like to end the show on that question. So, when you think about everything we've covered today, is there anything that you wanted to say or talk about that I neglected to ask about?
No, I guess not necessarily. It's just if people are interested in who I am. I also wrote a book about my life as an artist in Spain called Tapas of Tales. Am I saying that correct? Yeah, Tapas of Tales. I'm getting a bit confused now, but my English is good, but I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know why, but anyway, so maybe that could be interesting, because it's a quirky stories that actually really happened to me here in Spain, and that's also my style. So I like to write about things that happen, and I also wrote a book about the village where I live, which is an interesting village called La Herradura, which actually means horseshoe bay, a horseshoe, and it's a bay in the form of a horseshoe. And it attracts a lot of energy, has a really special energy, and it attracts a lot of artists and writers and musicians. So it's a very interesting little village, and I'm quite happy to be here. So yeah, I guess, I don't know, I'm just babbling a little bit. Yeah.
So we're going to put all that in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you.
I think the overarching thing that I'm feeling here is that if you're listening to Renate and you see how quirky and cool and groovy she is, then you're probably going to vibe with all of her things. So check them out. Check out her art and her writing, because see, we're all quirky here. In my community, Someone Gets Me at members.someonegetsme.com, which is associated with this podcast. We're all the quirky, goofy people hanging out in our own little
fantastic
community.
Yeah.
And I have an inner circle there and all of that kind of thing. So you may want to hop on there and hang out with us. So
nice.
The last question of the day is, if we were going to have a billboard that the entire world was going to see with Renate's quote on it, what would it say?
Probably trust your intuition and share your inspiration.
Ooh, I love that. Trust your intuition and share your inspiration. Woo, that's right up my alley. Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you, Renate, for being on the show with us today. Thank you for sharing your value and your wisdom and your creativity in how to deal with change. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Diane. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. Now you've got me doing it. It's my pleasure to host this show. So remember, everybody, put your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you, because you're a rock star. You're here on purpose with a purpose. So go out there and let your light shine and be that lighthouse that you're meant to be. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, be well.
Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episodes, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.